Grade 12, Lesson 3, Insert into SQL. Good day everybody, welcome to the third lesson of Grade 12 Databases. We will look at how to insert into a database with SQL. Let's begin. The content of this video. We will look at some structure options, specifically shorthand and the long way. We will then look at some examples. Let's look at the basic structure of an insert. So first you've got insert into. This specifies the table it needs to insert into. Then we've got values. These are the values for the fields. Now, as a note, remember strings need single quotation marks around them when inserting into a database or when using them in a SQL statement. Okay, let's look at the shorthand structure. Insert into table values v1, v2, v3, v4 to vn. Table is the table you want to insert into. v1 to vn is the values for the fields. Please note with shorthand, the values have to be ordered in the same order as the columns in the table. For example, if we have the following fields, ID, initial, surname in table person, we want to insert Mr. J Bond with ID 007 into the table. The order of the values will be 007 J Bond, 007 being the ID, J being the initial, Bond being the surname, as the fields are in table person. Let's look at the long way. So the long way is the preferred method. We will come to this now after we've looked at the structure. So the structure is insert into table, column 1, column 2, column 3, up to column n, where n is the maximum amount of columns you've got in your table. Values v1, v2, v3, up to vn, a value for each column. Table is the table you want to insert into. Column is the field names you are inserting into. V is the value you're inserting into the corresponding field. So, in other words, V1 goes into column 1, V2 goes into column 2, V3 goes into column 3. Now, why is this the preferred method? The reason why is it links each column to a value. So the column order does not need to be the same as it is in the table. You can switch the column order around, it still links it to the right column. Let's look at some examples. So, given this table, give the SQL to insert the following into the table MI6. We've got the ID of 006. We've got the initial of Q, surname of invention, skill of scientist, lethal of N. Pause the video here and work out what the shorthand SQL statement will be and what the longhand SQL statement will be. Okay, let's look at some answers. So for the short, we've got insert into MI6 values 006, Q, so around with single quotation marks, invention with single quotation marks around it, scientist with single quotation marks around it, and N with single quotation marks around it. Let's look at the long version. Insert into MI6 in brackets ID, comma, initial, comma, surname, comma, skill, comma, and lethal. We close the bracket. Values in brackets 006, comma, single quotation marks around the Q, comma, single quotation marks around invention, comma, single quotation marks around scientist, comma, single quotation marks around N, close the bracket. Let's look at another example. Again, given the table, give the SQL statement to insert the following into table MI6. ID of 008, initial of M, surname of Moneypenny, skill of secretary, and lethal of yes. Pause the video here and try and work out the short and long versions of the SQL statement. Okay, let's look at some answers. Insert into MI6 values 008, M with single quotation marks, comma, Moneypenny with single quotation marks around, comma, secretary with single quotation marks around, comma, Y with single quotation marks around it. This is the shorthand. For the longhand, we've got insert into MI6 initial, ID, surname, lethal, skill. Let's quickly pause here. Do you note that the order I just read out of the fields does not match with the table, but it will still insert all the correct values into the table because we are linking each value to the corresponding column. So, values, Q goes to initial, 008 goes to ID, surname gets money penny, lethal gets yes, and skill gets secretary. Now next, we're going to look at a Delphi example. Insert the following into employee table. ID, MP007, employee name, J.Bond, age 50, income 40,000, tax group MT_01. Let's look at the example. And here is our example. Just as a forenote, the display function displays all the values in the employee table. If you're unsure how to do that, please see our video on querying for SQL. Okay, so let's begin. So in our insert, we will be doing this the long way. We'll first close our query, close. Now if you're unsure where DM and query.sql comes from, please see our video on how to link a Delphi program with with a database for SQL. Okay, so next thing we do is dm.query SQL.text and then dm.query SQL.execute SQL. Now this is where the difference comes in between querying and executing or inserting. So when you search or when you insert, update and delete, for searching you use open, for insert, update and delete you use execute SQL. Okay, so now let's build up our SQL statement. So first we say insert into employee. Now we give all of the table names. Okay, as the SQL statement is getting a tad bit long, I'm just going to take it down to the next line. Now, something to note, in the slides we said we use single quotation marks, but because for Delphi single quotation marks indicates a string, we are allowed to use double quotation marks. Just please take note of that. Normally you would use single, but for Delphi we use double. And now another thing you can note, we do not have to put it around a string, or around a number. If you want to, you can. If you don't want to, you can just leave it out. Close our bracket. So as you can see, this is how your SQL statement looks. So insert into employee, we give our list of tables. We just see I forgot one here. Forgot the income table. So we've got ID, employee name, age, income, tax group ID. With SQL, make sure of your spelling. As you can see now, I'm double checking that my spelling is correct, else it will give you a lot of errors. So double check on your spelling. Values, EMP007, J.Bond, 50, 40,000, MT01. So let's save and run. Okay, so now that we are running our program, let's first display. As you can see, there's all our values. If we insert, takes them away. If we display again, here you can see 007 has been added. Now, as an added exercise for you at home, please think about how you can get user input and add it to the database. So have a bunch of edits or input boxes or read it in from a text file and add it to your database. But this is an example of a fixed query. Try and make a dynamic one by getting user input.